That's President Akufo-Addo with update number 29. Appears that's the very last in terms of fellow Ghanaians briefings that we'll be getting Sunday evenings as and when, and the president tells us that this will be the final one. So we've been getting updates on COVID-19 as well as our journey to the IMF this time round. So COVID-19 no longer a public health emergency. After 3 years where we are now, we can now shake hands, but we ought to continue washing our hands because we've seen that the washing hands has helped in terms of reducing cholera cases. We haven't recorded any cholera cases this year, as well as diarrhea. And he gives us updates on 25 million vaccine doses administered so far, 10 million fully vaccinated. That's out of the 50.7% of the 20 million targets that we set out. No critical or severe cases recorded so far. We don't have any. The very last death, unfortunately, was on the 8th of January 2023. That's the very last one. And 1,462 deaths were recorded in Ghana over the period. When we first recorded COVID-19 in Ghana on the 12th of March 2020. We all remember that. So COVID-19 task force met on the 17th of May, and we're told that COVID-19 is over in Ghana and all restrictions have been removed, especially at the airports and borders, amongst others. National disinfections of markets will continue so that our markets will be rid of rodents, among others. He goes on now to give updates also on the IMF, and also information was expensive during the COVID-19. We talked about public education, but when it comes to COVID-19 levy, we ought to bear with government on that. He says we don't have any sign as to when that is going just yet, but it maintains that crisis was not used as a cover for corruption, and that was stressed. And COVID-19 Trust Fund is still on, and the thank yous have been said to all that participated and made it possible for us to fight COVID-19 when it came to Ghana until today, that thankfully is no longer in Ghana or a public health crisis. And measures taken so far with COVID-19 mentions that the fund that were used were audited by the Auditor General and maintains that it was not used as a cover for corruption. Extraordinary times forced us to take extraordinary measures, which led us back to the IMF and been explaining that our first 600 million, we've been reporting that from the business desk, that is hit the Bank of Ghana's account. And this IMF particular deal that we have will not change things or not take us completely out of the current economic crisis that we have faced as a country, but assures that we shall definitely overcome the situation. So largely, this is what we've been doing, or the update the president has been giving us for the past 30 minutes. And he says that we ought to remain resolute and focused. We shall overcome the economic difficulties. So in summary, this is what the president has been saying in update number 29. This is the probe here on the Joy News channel. We'll get some comments on this. At least we're hoping that we'll get what we do not know just yet, but we've been told everything already. So we'll get into our discussion for today. Definitely, I was hoping that we could bring in Professor Godfred Bopping briefly to give us his initial thoughts on comments made by the president. But I'm thinking that everything else has been said. We've been talking about it over the period since we went to the IMF. So it's a good time to go back to our earlier advertised discussion, the reign of the next Chief Justice, Gertrude Torkornoo, while assessing the end of the reign of Chief Justice Anin Yeboah. In Gertrude Torkornoo's words, she thinks that she will be approved. We'll be taking a look at the assessment, the challenges, as well as what she ought to do, opportunities for her in addressing issues like judicial independence, access to justice, efficiency, and public trust, more importantly, because this is an issue that people have talked about. The judiciary has been described as a unanimous FC, especially at the Supreme Court. Well, these and more are here on The Probe, live on radio. It's Joy 99.7 FM. On Joy News, we are on myjoyonline.com, all our social media platforms. Don't forget to put your comments there on all our social media platforms. On Facebook, you can hashtag it The Probe. I'll introduce my guests shortly. Yeah, do we have to take a break? But no, well, okay, we'll just go straight into it. And Jose Usu, the first Deputy Speaker of Parliament and MP for Bekwai, is joining us via Zoom, and it's been a busy Friday for them, and they've been vetting the new Chief Justice once she is approved. We'll also be joined in the studio. In fact, we are joined in the studio by Abdullahi Yakubu, the General Secretary of the Judicial Services Staff Association of Ghana, JUSAC, my guest in studio. And the rest will join us via Zoom, as and when they do. I'll acknowledge them. But we are expecting Justice Abdullahi, a law lecturer and lawyer. Justice Remsai, also a law lecturer and a lawyer as well. We're also expecting Captain Retired Nkrabea Efadate. We'll take a look at the reign of Chief Justice Anin Yeboah and then look ahead into GETRUDE TORKONOO. We'll take a quick break, and then we'll look at everything, put everything in perspective, then we can start the discussion. Thanks for staying with us here on The Probe, and thankfully, because of fellow Ghanaians, we have some extension so we can do justice to the issues that we've put out today. But let me briefly bring in Professor Godfred Bokping, an economist, and taking a look at the issues raised by the President regarding the IMF and the painful decision that led us to go back there. Professor Bokping, thank you so much for joining us here on The Probe. You have to unmute. Okay, good.
Good evening to my co-panelists, and then good evening to our charity viewers.
Okay.
I think, yes, my initial comment would be that, yes, the President acknowledged the peculiarity of our situation. The President acknowledged the impact of COVID-19 and all of that, yes. And the President also acknowledged that it was a difficult decision for him to take. And I think we knew that. We knew that it was a difficult decision for him to take. Unfortunately, he took the decision too late, right? And for me, that was a leadership failure. No matter how difficult that it was, acting in a timely and proactive way is a mark of leadership. And I think that from that perspective, I felt that the President wasn't led by the data. He was led more by emotions and probably ideological stand or whatever, unlike in the case of COVID, right? And if you look at the posture of the President in the fellow Ghanaians, you could see that the President relied more on expert advice and input in the measures that he took. And from the start to the end, Ghana had been commended in terms of our response and all of that. Of course, we are not talking about how the virus was monetized in the case of Ghana, for which we now have a tax handle to celebrate COVID, right? And then also the expenditure issues and the rest of them. You could see that the government relied more on the scientists' advice, expert advice, and at some point we were ahead of the curve. But then when it came to the economy, my considered view is that the government was operating behind the curve. And the reason I'm saying so is that it was actually in the third quarter, towards the end of the third quarter of 2021, that it became clear to us economists that Ghana was heading dangerously and that Ghana needed to reach out to the IMF. It was in the third quarter of 2021. And the reason I'm saying so is that unlike when the President, during the State of the Nation address in 2023, assured us that his government hadn't been reckless with borrowing, that verdict was actually delivered in the third quarter of 2021, when the market kicked us out. Because towards the end of third quarter, running to the fourth quarter of 2021, the government had gone to the Eurobond market to go and borrow, and the market kicked us out. That was the market verdict of our borrowing spree. That was the market verdict. That was the clearest notice, message, signal that your economy, we had lost it. We had lost confidence. We had lost the policy credibility. And therefore, we felt that with that message, what government needed to have done was to assess the whole issue comprehensively with a possible look, when it came to COVID, you could see that the team of expert government mobilized cuts across the broader society.
Okay.
And therefore, the issue of politics and the rest of them probably became a bit mute. You had the best of Ghana's scientists from the Noguchi Memorial Institute at the University of Ghana. You can't get it better than that.
Okay, but Prof, I'm sure these are issues that we'll get into since we are only taking your immediate reaction to this. But listening to the president, did it inspire some form of confidence in you, telling us that they are going to be committed to the discipline and the hard work to bring the economy back on track? You're convinced?
No, not at all. Not at all. I didn't hear what I wanted to hear. I didn't get the impression that there was some level of remorse. I didn't get the impression that there was a certain sense of urgency that Ghana needed to tackle its economic crisis in the same way that we approach COVID.
Okay.
In a certain broad-based, inclusive way, right? I didn't get the impression that the economy matters that much like COVID. Okay, and that is unfortunate because we needed to declare war on our economic situation. And we needed to tap into the expertise of every Ghanaian, regardless of their political affiliation, across the best institutions in this country. That didn't come out clearly. And you could see that in the case of the economy, it showed in why government responded so late. Okay. And in the case of COVID, it also showed why if you rely on experts, regardless of political affiliation, you are likely to make better and informed judgments. And the country will end up being better because whether we like it or not, development is knowledge intensive. Okay. And the knowledge may not be solely in the library of your political party or your inner circle. You need to reach out. Okay. And that didn't come out clearly in the case of the economy.
Thank you very much, Professor Godwin, for spending some time of the night with us. But this is an issue that we'll definitely be delving deeper into subsequently on our other shows as well. We are grateful for your time, Professor Godwin. But let me stay on Zoom and also in the studios. We have Abdullahi Yakubu with us in the studios. We are assessing the legacy of Justice Anin Yeboah and looking ahead into Gertrude Torkornoo's reign once she is approved. And we also have the first Deputy Speaker of Parliament with us via Zoom. Good evening, Mr. Osei-Owusu, and thank you so much for joining us here on The Probe. Hello, Mr. Osei-Owusu. If you can unmute so we can hear you, sir. We seem to be losing you along the line, but I'm sure the technical team will work on that shortly so we can have a clearer feed to Jose Usu. But in the studios, Abdullahi Yakubu, thank you so much for joining us in the studios and spending time with us this evening.
Thank you, Emefa.
It's been a long week, I should say. Are we going back to work tomorrow? Everything resolved?
Not yet.
Oh.
We expect some things to happen tomorrow, but definitely we're not going back to work tomorrow.
But the Judicial Service issued a statement calling on you or appealing to the leadership of JUSAC that whilst they work on getting you what you're asking for, you go back to work.
We prefer to get to the table and see the work that is ongoing about the approval of our salaries. Then we can take a decision from there.
You won't go to work and do that negotiation?
No, let's get to the table and know what is coming.
Is it that you do not trust your leadership to get you what you're asking for?
I think we are being reasonable.
Okay.
It's good to take the word of our leadership, the management of the service, that we should go to work whilst work is being done to approve it. But it's also prudent that we get to the table and draw a roadmap as to how we're going to get the approval and how it's going to be paid and what it's actually going to be. Then we can think of taking a decision on the strike.
But so far, since you declared the strike, I will get into our issues, but we just need to get this out of the way. So far, since the declaration of the strike, what has been the response? What kind of response have you had from the appropriate authorities when it comes to this?
Yeah, I think from the declaration of the strike up to date, we've had the management calling us to hold a meeting. We've also had a bit of some engagement with the government side.
Okay.
We're hoping that on Wednesday, we had an information that on Wednesday, government is going to be meeting us with our management. So those are some of the things that we have had from the government side.
Okay. So lastly, we want to find out, what would it take for you to call off this action?
The ultimate thing that we want before we call off the action is the approval and payment of the reviewed salaries with all the arrears from January up to the month of approval. That is what we want.
What's really the range? What are we looking at when it comes to this salary adjustments?
Oh, before I tell you, what we sent out. We in judicial service, our salaries are reviewed every 2 years. Okay. So the Ghanaians don't think they're looking for something too big. Okay, so because it's a 2 years, when we go, we can't go again. So the proposal we submitted was a 50% adjustment in the basic salary for a 2-year period. Okay.
Well, but since then, have we heard from the outgoing Chief Justice? I know you have a very cordial relationship. You've described him as a very labor-friendly person. Maybe that was your initial assessment of his tenure. Has he reached out? Have we heard from the nominee as well? Have they all reached out in terms of getting you back to work?
Yeah, behind the scenes, a lot of work has gone on. Behind the scenes. Okay. Before my Lord Justice Anin Yeboah left office, he held a meeting with us. We earlier wrote to him, he gave us his assurance, and he also pushed for us a bit, just that we could not get what we wanted before he left office, unfortunately. And the nominee also has engaged us, she's our mother. She has also engaged us behind the scenes. Even before she appeared for betting, she did something in the quiet to help us get what we wanted. Unfortunately, that did not also yield the results within the time that we want. We are hoping that it will yield the results at the appropriate time, but as it stands now, we haven't gotten what we wanted.
It looks like a lot has been done in the background, but it's still not getting you to go back to work. But I don't know, we'll go on to Zoom, but I'm told that my Zoom issues have not been resolved. So let's get into some of the issues that I've started by saying that you've described him as a labor-friendly person in terms of your assessment of Chief Justice Anin Yeboah. Let's talk about, really, generally, for JUSAC. I'm sure you're speaking on behalf of the entire association when it comes to your assessment of Chief Justice Anin Yeboah.
Definitely.
What would you say it will be?
I think when we look at the short period during which he presided over the judiciary, the third arm of government, we observe a number of critical changes that he brought into the service. Typical of that one is what people have felt across the country, which is the massive infrastructure development that we have received. He came on the seat as Chief Justice, and we've had over 100 courts and bungalows being construction started in them. A lot of them has completed, and he has commissioned a number of them before he left office. Mention can be made of the Appeal Court Justices Bungalow at Danyami in Kumasi. It is one of the edifices that we love so much. Personally, we have followed him JUSAC to a number of courts that he has commissioned. It is not just the court being commissioned, but if you see the kind of installations that we have in there, it is very, very promising. So that's one thing that every staff of the service is happy about, and it's helping to bring justice to the doorsteps of the people. Those courts that could not be commissioned after he left, we're hoping that we'll get them. One other thing that we also need to mention about the Justice Anin Yeboah is the introduction of Judges' Performance Assessment Review. He came with that project, that reform, at the end when he was almost exiting office, and he launched it to use it as a tool to check some of the few abuses that we may find with some of our judges. We think it's a positive step that he has taken, and we must commend him for that. We are also very glad to note that when my Lord Justice Anin Yeboah was there, he gave his support to the e-Justice project. We've seen an upscale in terms of where it started up to where it is now. He came at a time that we had COVID, and you could see hearing being done online, Zoom, via virtual course taking place during the tenure of my Lord. Then also we could have, there was this thing about appeal records that were being outsourced to third parties. And when he came, he felt that, no, this issue is about confidentiality of the information that we are dealing with. So there need to be a reform to ensure that appeal records are being done within in-house so that we can be sure of the confidentiality and the security of the documents that we are working with. It is
well, I know you have a long list. We'll get to go through them. I have a slide also that we'll be getting into shortly, but because radio audience will leave us at 8, let me try again and see if we have Jose Usu joining us via Zoom now, if we've rectified that connection to him. It looks like, yes, it's working now. Thank you so much for joining us once again here on The Probe, sir. Can you hear me, Mr. Seusu? Hello, Mr. Seusu. Can you hear me, sir?
Can you hear me? I can hear a thing.
Yes, we can hear you now, sir.
Better now.
Loud and clear. Better. Thank God we have a connection to you now. So first off, I don't know. I know that most of the time you don't get to monitor Facebook and social media amongst others. But for you, starting off with your vetting that we saw on Friday, what would you say is your general assessment of how the vetting of Chief Justice nominee Gertrude Torkornoo went? Because there are some members of the public who have criticized how your committee has gone about its work, especially faulting the line of questioning of some of your MPs. As leader of that group, what will be your own assessment of what you did on Friday?
Well, thank you, and good evening to your listeners. I would have loved to read some of the criticism, the specifics. As you know, or you stated clearly, I'm hardly a social media person. So regrettably, I haven't read any of the said comments, but I think that the questions were satisfactory because, as we said, for a Chief Justice, his knowledge of the law would have been an issue. But because barely 4 years ago, the same committee vetted her and evaluated her and considered her sufficiently well trained in the law and his knowledge base in the law as sufficient to be on the Supreme Court bench, our interest now was more focused on administration of justice and what more we expect that she will bring to the table. So we didn't spend a lot of time trying to verify her knowledge of the law because we're satisfied that at the time we vetted her 4 years ago and her judgments we have heard and read, we were satisfied that she was sufficiently well versed in the law. So I would have loved to hear what people say of us. I have always insisted that the best evaluation is from the end users of your product. So we learn from what they expect. But sometimes I think that people expect a lot more than it's possible and practicable. So I would have loved to hear it, to be satisfied or to be informed what they expected and what we delivered.
Well, there have been suggestions about sector-specific vetting. I'll come into that because they say that when it comes to a Chief Justice nominee, for instance, maybe we leave it to the Constitution and Legal Affairs Committee to take a look at it. But that's an issue we'll get into shortly. But first, let me also find out if at the level of the committee, you've taken a decision on the nominee yet, because we know that the minority had raised some concerns. There was a request from the minority to have a second round of vetting after the decision on Judge Kwesing is published. So I would want to know what's the real decision that has been taken when it comes to the committee.
Well, I'm not aware of a request for a second round of vetting. What they did say after we left the public hearing and went into a conclave, what they suggested was that to come to a conclusion whether to support her nomination or not, they would like to read the verdict or the reasons behind the verdict in respect of the former MP for the Supreme Court says we should not acknowledge that she was even an MP, but Mr. Judge Kwesing. At our meeting, we came looking at the rules, understanding of this. It was not practicable not to come to a conclusion. So the decision was that, well, it is taken that the minority voting against her, and therefore we'll present a report presenting the decision of the House as, decision of the committee as a majority decision. That's how we ended in the end.
Yeah, okay. So as we speak, the minority have taken that position. So when will, what are the timelines we are looking at in terms of when actually this report, the majority decision, will be communicated amongst others?
Well, Parliament will resume on the 6th. The report is likely to be ready by then, and it will be tabled. The decision usually is not in two parts. The verdict is that the member is recommended by a majority decision. That's all. And the House will then go through the motions if the decision is not unanimous. Consequence is that the report is debated and a decision is taken by a secret ballot.
Okay. Well, I'll say goodbye to our radio audience at this point. Joy 99.7 FM, they'll leave us at this point. A Walk with Jesus continues, but because we had to extend this show today because of fellow Ghanaians, so unfortunately we'll have to leave our radio audience. But we are still live on all our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter Spaces, amongst others. You can join us live, and don't forget to leave your comments as well right there. And you just heard Joseph Osei-Wusu, First Deputy Speaker of Parliament, also Chairman of the Vetting Committee, the Appointments Committee of Parliament, I should say, and he's been giving us updates on where we are after that particular vetting plus assessment of the work that they've done. Also in the studios with me is Abdullahi, and he is Abdullahi Yakubu with JUSAC, General Secretary of JUSAC, my guest in the studio, and also via Zoom. So, Mr. Osei-Wusu, I was asking briefly, we'll take away issues about vetting. I want to just wrap up on that. Then we can get into assessment of Chief Justice Anin Yeboah, and then the reign, or what we are looking at in terms of our expectations of GETRUDE Torkornoo once she is approved in her where she thinks she will be. And it looks like the majority are giving her that nod, but the minority have concerns. But I was asking earlier about the sector-specific committees to take over vetting. So, for instance, when it is the judiciary, we let the Judiciary Committee or the Constitutional and Legal Affairs Committee, so that, so to speak, will get a thorough job being done, because all the people would have that legalese and the expertise to be able to do that. Is it a suggestion worth considering?
Well, the truth of the matter is that there's no committee which is made up of all experts in that particular area. So the Judiciary Committee is not made up of lawyers or former judges. Neither is the Constitutional and Legal Committee. Usually the chairman and ranking member would be, and probably their deputies, but there's some other members who are non-lawyers, just as the Appointments Committee. There are lawyers on both sides of the divide, and there are non-lawyers on both sides of the divide. So I recall in my second year, I was the member of the Appointments Committee and also the ranking member for Constitutional and Legal. The chairman and ranking member were invited to join in the consideration of the nomination of Supreme Court nominees. But in my case, for example, I was a member already, so it didn't make much difference. And when it comes to decision making, since they are non-members of the committee, they cannot take part in a decision. At best, they can only be offered the opportunity to ask questions in that regard. But otherwise, there's no specialized committee in which members are all lawyers to deal with appointments into the judiciary, as in Supreme Court justices. No.
Okay. Well, but wondering, curious, because this is not the first time we're seeing this. How is it that all the time, or most of the times at least, what we've seen so far, the committee is always divided on partisan lines, even for nominations like the Chief Justice?
Wish I knew why. I truly wish I knew why. Because I thought that these matters are legal. Unless there are questions of integrity, the integrity issues in respect of any candidate, I don't think that we should be having divisions on party lines. But if you paid attention to my closing statement, I said that anytime a party is in opposition, it is loud at criticizing or attacking the judiciary as not being or being biased in favor of government. I don't know why that perception still persists, because time and over again it has been proven to be otherwise. I think that it is more about the people, the perceptions we carry, and which we repeat so much we tend to believe them rather than the facts that it often happens.
Okay. Well, Justice, I don't know. I'm sure you monitored, Abdullah, sorry. I'm sure you monitored the entire vetting process, though. I'm sure you have a take in terms of what you saw in your own assessment.
I transcribed even as the proceedings was
going
to update our members about it. Yes.
Okay. So generally, what would you say was your assessment of the work that was done by the committee?
Oh, well, the work of the committee wasn't bad, except to say that a number of issues came up that we thought that the committee could have also had a holistic view of the work of our mother from the time that she started practice up to where she is today, instead of an attempt to limit her work to just one issue, use one issue to hang her. Otherwise, the committee did what they could do. It was very interactive. The Gachikwason
issue, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, please. Okay. Yes, please. It was interactive. Our mother did very excellent at the committee, and we're hoping that the Parliament committee, the committee as well as the plenary, when it gets there, she will excel through, and God willing, she will be our next.
How about the responses to your conditions of service specifically? Were you satisfied with that?
Oh, yes. The responses to the condition of service by our mother was okay. It was okay. Yes, that we'll be talking about expectations.
Okay.
So when we get to the expectations, those issues that we will want to add to what she said, we will bring those issues on board, because she talked about that the processes were ongoing. And truly, I'll be very fair, she actually engaged us in the quiet to see how she could also add her way of pushing for us to get what we wanted. So I agree with her largely on that one.
Okay.
But when it comes to the expectations,
I know you have a lot of expectations. Yes. Well, our research team put together some slides that we can quickly go through in terms of the research that has been done over the period, the leadership of Justice Anin Yeboah all the way till now. So it lists all the Fourth Republic list of Chief Justices that we've had, all the way from Philip Edward Archer through to George Kingsley Akwa, then to Sophia Ekofu, then Anin Yeboah. We had Georgina Theodora Wood, and to where we are today, and hoping that Justice Torkornoo will be approved from where we are. So legacy of Justice Anin Yeboah, you know, he served as Assistant State Attorney at the Attorney General's office in Koforidua. He proceeded to work as a partner at FISEM Chambers at his Koforidua branch. He was later elected Eastern Regional Bar President, served as a Justice of the High Court from 2002, then to Appeals Court from 2003 to 2008. And then he also provided his legal experience to football in this country, serving as Chairman of the Appeal Committee at the Ghana Football Association from 2004 to 2008. Then he was appointed to the Supreme Court by President John Ejiokum Kufuor in June 2008. Then international assignment, he rose to become a member of the Adjudicatory Chamber of FIFA. He was subsequently appointed in May 2017, became chairman of the FIFA Ethics Committee, a body primarily responsible for investigating possible infringements of the FIFA Code of Ethics. Then we move on to some of the things that he's been doing over the period. Anin Yeboah also served in the Confederation of African Football. Then in September 2019, he was named the CAF FIFA Reform Implementation Task Force team for African football. We'll run through some of them. Then notable cases. Well, this one, the John Dramani Mahama versus Electoral Commission and Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo. That's the election petition in 2020, after the 2020 election. Then we have this one, the 18th July Limited versus Yehans International Limited. We also have the Republic versus the High Court. We have the Sam Jonah versus Richmond Agri, Yoni Kulendi and Kulendi at law. We have the Republic versus High Court. Court, Accra ex parte, Justice Povra Teriwaja, and Henry Noete Kobo. The law students, amongst others, are watching keenly. We also have the Yehans International Limited versus Matthew True Family, the Republic versus VC of KNUST ex parte. So these are some of the notable cases that he's overseen. And then we have the judiciary dispensed with 13 constitutional review cases, and also in 2020-2021 legal year, 63,293 cases were disposed of, while 72,568 cases were filed. That's the court administration program. Also, the pilot of the online court system, the virtual court that Abdullah has been talking about. The Judicial Service is also acquiring equipment and software applications for a full rollout to 138 selected districts, circuit, and high courts. And then also alternative dispute resolution program. We've had under the Judicial Services Alternative Dispute Resolution ADR system, 4,189 cases were referred for mediation, and also 1,763 cases were successfully concluded. The presence of the Public Complaints and Court Inspectorate Unit have increased from 4 to 10 administrative capitals of the country, and we are told all are functioning. And Jusak is here and will verify that for us. And then during the 2020-2021 legal year, a total of 538 persons trained were 38 magistrates, judges, and 500 staff. And in the course of the period under review, 8 district magistrates as well as 8 superior court judges and 500 staff were appointed to fill various vacant positions. So some of these are some, at least the pictures ruling as well. The Bompata courthouse. We have the new courthouse at Somanya, some of them, at least these are some of the photos. The Pachi number 2 courthouse. Yeah, and then we go on to some of them. Other photos, construction of courthouse at Jabing. These are photos that Martin put together. But some of the dents also that we've had under his leadership, you all remember the $5 million bribery allegations, which the Chief Justice denied at the time. It became an issue that the attention of the Director General of the CID was drawn to the IGP on July 12th, and signed by the Judicial Secretary. There was a response from His Lordship, and he assessed that he has not demanded or received any money from any person to influence any decision in that matter or any other matter. We go on, and then we know that Kwesi Afrifa, that lawyer, the lawyer in the center of all this, alleged that his former client, Ojedom Obrenu Kwesiata IV, informed him that Chief Justice Kwesi Anin Yeboah demanded a bribe of $5 million for a successful outcome. He went on to say that they had already advanced $500,000 to the Chief Justice as a result. Then we now focus on GETRUDE Torkornoo in the next minutes as well. 60 years called to the bar, High Court, Appeals Court, Supreme Court, rose through the ranks to where she is now. And also on that case, John Mahama versus Akufo-Addo and Electoral Commission, she was part of that 7-member panel. Also on the Michael Akumanimfa, the James Chachikweson case, amongst others. So awaiting approval from Parliament after her vetting on Friday. So let's get into assessment of Justice Anin Yeboah, then we can look at our expectations as well. I don't know if we've had Justice Remsai, Captain Ifadate, amongst others, join us via Zoom, but it appears that we've had some difficulty with them. But Mr. Jose Wusu is still with us via Zoom. So I'll start with you because Abdullah has had his take a bit when it comes to assessment or looking at the legacy or the leadership of Justice Anin Yeboah. What do you say when it comes to your assessment of Justice Anin Yeboah and his leadership as Chief Justice, knowing very well that we've had cause for concern? Some have raised issues about the court being a unanimous FC. That's how they were tagged at some point because of the number of cases that we saw that they all, were part of or actually delivered justice on in that regard. And there've been talk about judicial independence, the lack of trust in the judiciary under his leadership. I would want to find out what your take is when it comes to your assessment of his leadership.
Well, I had earlier said that when it comes to assessing or evaluating the performance of anybody. The end users of the product will be the best judges. But I think that the president of the Bar Association, on the day they organized the farewell party for my Lord Justice Anin Yeboah, he summed up the performance of Justice Anin Yeboah in his speech. And if, with your permission, I'll quote him. I'm quoting lawyer Yeboah Legacy, the president of the Bar Association. He says, in a few days' time, he retires as Chief Justice of the Republic of Ghana. To say he has been a worthy and exemplary ambassador to
Okay, it appears that the line just froze on us, but we'll definitely get through it. Okay, so I'm told it's been resolved. Mr. Joyce, you are going to quote what Justice Mr. Yeboah said at that send-off ceremony.
It says that in a few days' time, he retires as Chief Justice of the Republic of Ghana. To say he has been a worthy and exemplary ambassador to the Ghana Bar Association would be an understatement. He has brought honor to the Bar GBA and repaid the confidence reposed in him by his unusual nomination by the Bar. That is why it would have been a travesty of justice if the Bar did not bid him farewell properly. This evening is a time for merrymaking. I'm jumping. He says, I will thus. This evening, I will not attempt to list the numerous achievements of His Lordship Anin Yeboah, except to say that his tenure on the bench as Chief Justice has been nothing short of phenomenal. Hopefully, in the subsequent years.
Oh dear.
It's an adjective for one who is competent, fair and firm, scholarly, diligent, humble, and hardworking. He has been associated with some of the landmark decisions of the Supreme Court that enriched our jurisprudence, shaped and influenced reforms in governance, and educated many. In all his decisions, he has exhibited remarkable knowledge and application of the law.
Okay.
It would be remiss on my part not to mention the massive infrastructure development witnessed during his tenure as Chief Justice. The late business magnate and co-founder of Apple, Steve Jobs, once said that quality is more important than quantity. I think this sums up the performance of my Lord Justice Anin Yeboah as Chief Justice. I have been associated with him much earlier in my life as a lawyer, and observing him as the Chief Justice, I clearly saw him living his philosophy, integrity, and a good quality of justice. I think that, good delivery of justice. I think that when it comes to his judgments, he will stand out as one of the judges who have the highest number of judgments differing from his colleagues. Justice Taylor used to be holding the record, but I think today, Lord Justice Anin Yeboah, they have the record of writing the highest number of dissenting judgments. He is good at his law, he is disciplined, he is very humane, and I'm sure that the gentleman in the studio will attest to that. He has lived a humble life, and he has worked as a humble person in all respects, and on any day, I would stand up for his integrity.
But issues about, when it comes to his legacy in terms of institutional advancement, judicial independence, because they say public perception is always everything, and also the protection of constitutional rights. What will be your evaluation?
See, I think if we listen to political office holders and political commentators, you would always misjudge a judge, so to speak. I think to evaluate a judge's independence, we must reference a judge's judgment on any matter, because judgments are based on the evidence, the principle to determine the issues. It is not the emotional outbursts that matter. I have no qualms at all in confirming that the judiciary of this country is totally independent. Of course, if you evaluate all the comments and complaints about lack of independence, they revolve around political and politically charged cases. The everyday person has absolute confidence in the courts, and they continue to run to the courts when they have issues. I think that should be what should influence our judgment, not what the politicians want to say.
Okay. Well, for you, Abdullahi,
let me come to this let me add about the law school. I've been one of the people who have been critical of access to the law school. But I noticed under his leadership, we have had the highest entry of young and grown people entering the law school. The last year alone, over 800 lawyers passed out. Main call and the minor call. It shows that they have opened up. Now they have about 5 campuses of the law school, which is remarkable. This all happened under his leadership.
Okay. Well, I see Abdullahi nodding to that, but the issue about the public perception and, the Supreme Court becoming a unanimous FC amongst others under his leadership and all, what do you say? You have a take on that?
I want you to look at a recent ruling in Mr. Opunu's case, where the new judge who came on the matter said the trial should start de novo.
Okay.
Not so much noise was made about it because it was in favor. Do you get it? So normally I always believe that. And also if you look at Ghana, we have so much taste for political issues. So when judges give rulings, unanimous decisions, a lot of them, we have them at the Supreme Court. But because they are not political in nature, the media will normally not report those cases because they are not mostly public interest cases. But since the political cases are public interest cases, when a unanimous decision is given, it is hyped by the political actors to make it seem as though the Supreme Court has a certain agenda against certain kind of people, but that is not the case. So it is largely a perception and also fueled by the attention of people on political cases at the Supreme Court.
Okay. Well, so I think we should be getting into expectations now, since the legacy or the leadership of Justice Anin Yeboah has at least ended. And we're looking at the expectation, at least for JUSAC. I'm sure that you're dying to put out your expectations for the Chief Justice nominee once she's approved. What really would they be, you'd say?
Okay, so first, I would like to comment a bit about our mother. When I first got to her office, I saw something, an inscription written that leadership is not an academic exercise. It is a moral and a spiritual calling. When I saw it on her desk, it touched my heart so much. That was my first time getting to her office. So it made me feel that it is a calling that she has received. And the Quran says, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ تُؤْتِي الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتَنْزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّنْ تَشَاءُ. And the good book also says, many are called, but few are chosen. Okay. The Quran verse actually says that sovereignty belongs to the Lord. He grants it to whom He wills, and He takes it away from whom He wills. Okay. It is God who has chosen our mother for us. And we sincerely believe that when she comes on board, our expectations are great. We believe that with the support of the government, she's going to make it. I'm dividing the expectations into two. One, what we want her to do, and what it will take for her to get those things done, because she's not going to work alone. She's going to work with other people. So I'm going to begin with the Judicial Service Regulation. Okay. We had a case at the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ordered that the Judicial Service should have a regulation. It is already a constitutional provision, but based on that judgment, we should have a regulation that will govern our condition of service. In 2012, we had condition of service for staff, that is the collective bargaining agreement. And you could see that a new regulation is coming to somehow replace it. So it is our expectation that during her regime, the 2012 condition of service will be taken alongside the draft regulation so that all the benefits that is due staff in the 2012 condition of service will be factored into the draft regulation, and we're hoping that during her tenure, that regulation will be passed into law. Oftentimes when you pick the regulation, the condition of service, you could see that when it comes to disciplinary issues, most of it are applied there. But when you take the condition of service, in terms of what the staff are supposed to benefit, it's not everything that they enjoy. The work on the judicial service regulation has far advanced, and when she comes, we're hoping that the 2012 condition of service will be factored into the regulation and we get it passed during her tenure.
Okay.
Then also, when you study judicial service or JUSAC, for the past 8 years, we have had to threaten 6 strikes in the past 8 years. And we've succeeded in declaring 3 strikes out of that.
Including this one.
Including this one. That is from 2015 to 2023. Our salaries are reviewed every 2 years. And it's like any time we're going to have the review, we have to either threaten strike or declare strike. We are hoping there is something missing. We don't declare strike because we want to declare or threaten strike because we want it. For its sake, there is something that is missing that is causing this thing to recur.
Okay.
And our expectation is that when our mother comes on board, she's going to take practical steps to ensure that these things do not occur again. And if you look at the regulation that I mentioned, the 2012 provides for standing negotiation committee in the service. We're hoping that to be factored into the regulation so that we will have a permanent committee that will always work on our condition of service, get it to the president quick enough so that we can get the approval and implementation within time.
Okay.
When we declare this strike, you realize that justice delivery grounded to a halt simply because the judges are not on strike, but they cannot work without us.
Of course.
Some have suggested that we are essential service providers. The service we provide is so critical, and are making suggestions that we should be classified as essential service providers. And I said that we should not be classified as essential service providers because you want us not to strike again.
Oh, but you know the service that you provide is essential.
If you must do that, we are okay with it. If you must do that, you must give us the benefits that essential service providers enjoy.
Okay.
So if you take this one, I'm also going to refer you to a case that JUSAC took the Attorney General to court in 2016, won some part of the judgment and some other parts of the judgments we did not win. JUSAC also disagreed with the position of the Supreme Court in that case.
Apart from your conditions of service,
yes.
I'm sure that we'll go through all of them, but what else are your expectations?
I'm
sure JUSAC is thinking about yourself right now.
Yes.
What else are you looking at, apart from your conditions?
We're also looking at a review of the CI 86, which is the fees schedule for the court, the fees that the court charges.
Okay.
In 2020, there was a court regulation that was passed to amend the Court Act and increase the jurisdiction of the district courts, monetary jurisdiction from 20,000 to 500,000. Okay. When that was done, there was the need for the CI 86 to be amended to increase the fee regime so that it will be in line with the new monetary jurisdiction. That has not been done. When that is done, it's going to rake in more revenue for the judicial service and for government, and that can also go a long way to benefit us.
Okay. Well, let me, the extended time is also just finishing on us. But let me wrap up at this point. Mr. Jowais, so she sat before you for over 3 hours. This is not the first time that you've been hearing her tell you about her plans in terms of legal affairs, amongst others, but this time as Chief Justice. Really, what are your expectations? Really, I'm concerned about the addressing issues like judicial independence, access to justice, efficiency, and public trust. You've heard JUSAC also. You have expectations of her, don't you?
When it comes to the judges, the work each individual has to do is entirely dependent on the individual judge's own understanding of the law and her mindset and her personal integrity. No Chief Justice can decree that. So I expect that if there are any deficiencies in the quality of the judges, continuous judicial education would be implemented to ensure that improve their justice. But I do know that when disciplinary matters appear before them, they deal with them quickly. But now they don't publicize them. They make sure that judges who are disciplined are quietly released, or if they are supposed to lose their any emoluments, it's done quietly. So people don't get to hear about those things anymore. You still seem to think that nothing happens. They do. But for me, I speak for the end users. What matters to us is that when I present the case to court, I'll get the expeditious hearing. Therefore, I'm eager to see that my Lord Justice Torkornoo will continue and complete the number of court structures that have been started.
Okay.
About 80 or so of them are at the last stages of completion, that they will be completed, and more judges will be recruited to man the court so that the everyday Ghanaian will have a place to have his for their matter.
Okay. Unfortunately, we'll have to end it here, but I'm sure that this is a discussion that will continue. Mr. Jose, we are grateful for your time as the First Deputy Speaker. Abdullahi Yakubu, General Secretary of GSAC, also joining us. Thank you so much. And this is a discussion that will continue right here on the Joy News channel. Have a good evening. I am Emefa Apawu.